Okay, great. It looks like we are live. So let's begin. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this live Q&A session on remote working. My name's Freddie. I'm part of the marketing team here at Sketch. And of course, I am joined today by Pieter and Emanuel, who are the co-founders, who are going to answer some of the questions that you've been sending us. And you've sent a lot of questions. We've had well over 100. And luckily for us, there were some common themes. There were some similar things. So we've grouped together some of those common similar questions, and we picked out some of the most popular ones. And we're going to try and get through as many of them as possible during today's session. So with that in mind, you might not hear your exact question being answered, but hopefully there'll be a question that's very similar to the one you asked. I'll be hosting today's session, and I'll be asking Pieter and Emanuel the questions. And I'll also try and add my perspective as someone who spent half their career working in a traditional office and the other half working remotely. Finally, if we have any time at the end, we'll take some additional questions via Twitter. So if you didn't get a chance to submit a question in advance, you can send them in using the hashtag SketchLive. That's SKETCHLIVE. And if we have time at the end, we'll pick a few up, but only if we have time. So no promises on that. All right. Okay. Let's dive in and go. First question, hopefully an easy one. Does working from home really work?
Yeah. So I think it does. We've been doing this since 2011. I think it's. I mean, with what we built with Sketch, I think it works. I must add the caveat that I've never really worked in an office. So this might have all been very inefficient all this time, but yeah, I think it works.
Indeed.
Yes, I mean, as someone who hasn't always worked remotely, I think it's working for us anyway. The next question: what do we think is the biggest obstacle in remote working?
I don't think remote working itself is an obstacle. I think the mindset you put yourself on might be. Mm-hmm. For me, it's about communication. If everybody is remote, you have to communicate the same way. However, if you have half of the team working on an office and half of the team working remote, communication might be a problem because eventually a few things will go by not discussed in a wider way. But for me, it's about mindset. At least it was when we started Sketch. Make sure that we could communicate in very clear ways for all people involved. In our case, we were heavy users of a similar tool to Slack. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the name, Peter? I don't. HipChat, I think, right?
HipChat. Yeah, that rings a bell.
We used HipChat, but before that we used another tool which no longer exists. Name I forgot. Yes, indeed. But no, indeed. I think it really helps to have everybody working the same way.
Yeah.
It's mixed. It's a lot harder, I think.
Yeah. I mean, speaking as previously, I was a freelancer many years ago. And in that case, I'd often be working remotely for a team that was in an office. And the difference in communication is much more difficult because people are talking about stuff in an office and they're not used to sharing everything. Whereas here we have this kind of default of always being open and always communicating, making sure we're writing things down, sharing things with people. I think that if you can, like you say, Emanuel, if you can get over that, then that's maybe the biggest obstacle. But like you say, it's more of a mindset shift than anything else. There's no specific barrier. Yeah. Next question: what advice would you give to people who are looking to start work remotely, and how can they stay productive with all the distractions at home?
Yeah, I think it really helps to be strict. Mm-hmm. With yourself, with your spouse or whoever else might be at home to distract you. It helps to have a space at home where you work so that you can close the door behind you when you're done. I think this not only helps with the distractions, but also with keeping your sanity. Mm-hmm. If your work is just a few meters away, then in the evening hours it's very tempting to check back on that as well. And you don't want to not do that. Work hours, 9 to 5 is for work, and the rest is not for work. So, and that also includes a very tempting distraction you might have doing the dishes or washing, just doing a bit of shopping. I mean, it's important to go out, but you can fill your day with 100 small distractions, which mean that you don't get any work done. So I think just those clear boundaries help a lot, and everybody in your household has to understand those.
Right.
That is important in my opinion. Everyone that lives in the same place that you plan to work needs to be very aware that you are actually working. I see in the beginning many people expect, since you're working from home, you're going to take care of the kids, you're going to do the dishes, you're going to do maintenance in the house. Well, no, you're working. And I think that is very important to define right from the beginning, that you have a space for work, you have a definite schedule for work, and then later you go back to your life. That is very important, at least in the beginning. I find that very important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I think having that separate space, if that's something that's possible for you, is really important. Like I'm sitting in my office right now, and everyone who lives with me knows that once the door is closed, I'm working. And they want to get hold of me, they can knock and they can, or they can text me or whatever. But like, if I'm in here and the door's closed, I'm working, which means that I can't do errands or, sort out things around the house, the washing, like you say. I mean, it's important to take breaks. Like you can't sit at the computer for 8 hours and not move. You need to take breaks, but it is really easy when you're working from home. Especially if you haven't got a separate office, if you're maybe sitting at like a kitchen table or a dining table, easy to look around the house and think, oh, I could just go and do that thing, or I could just clean that thing, or I could just fix that thing. And all of a sudden your workday just gets so fragmented. So yeah, it's that balance. You've got to take some breaks, but you're not during the workday, leave the housework and, worry about that, like you say, after 5 o'clock.
Yeah. And indeed, and especially having been a developer originally, I can very much appreciate the importance of focus. You just want to have no distractions for a couple of hours where you can just really focus on your work. Mm-hmm. And in that respect, I think the remote working aspect is harder. You can just turn off no notifications, and nobody can walk by your desk and just interrupt you for a minute with some trivial question. You have the choice to have that focus, and I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, in my last office job, the first thing I do every day was go and find the quietest, least busy part of the office and just kind of shut myself away, because that was the way I'd get work done without being distracted. So yeah, remote work has a real advantage there. Next question. How important do you think mental health and mood are when it comes to remote work?
No more or less than your work in an office or any other setting. I think it's important to define, again, a method. Like, don't get locked up. Force yourself to go out for lunch if you think it's going to allow you to refresh a little bit. Go for a walk or something. I think it's important to understand that in an office, most of the time, you don't get locked up the whole time you're working. You get to go out, you get to stop by the water cooler and discuss something with your friends, stuff like that. Try to implement something similar, like stop every hour for 5 minutes, go get some coffee, drink some water, try to move away from your desk. I think that would be a good way to start.
Yeah, definitely. I find myself that during the work week, every other week or so, I try and arrange like lunch with a friend so that it makes me get up and go out. And that's really helpful. Like, gives me a little bit of structure. But even on the days when I'm not making plans with other people, I always try and make a point of, I have my lunch and then I'll go out and walk for like 20 minutes or so, just get some fresh air and some sunlight. If that's something you can do right now, some people can't right now, that's okay. That's helpful. But even just getting up, getting away from the place you're working, we talked about having a separate place to work, getting up and getting away from that, your screen for, 5 minutes or so, it's going to be really helpful. As a follow-up question to that, how do you promote good attitudes to mental health across your team? So this is more about running the business side and how you promote that mental health attitudes with employees.
Yeah, I think here it helps to set a good example. It's harder to do when you run the business to close the door at 5. But I think it helps to set an example that just because like I try not to be too active on Slack after work hours, even though sometimes I have to be there, especially with people in multiple time zones and things like that. And just because everybody is one direct message away on Slack, like try to resist that temptation. I think in office life you have the same thing. I mean, emails don't stop after work hours very often. Any emails, and I think we're quite clear in encouraging people to turn off their Slack notification after work hours.
That's kind of how I do it. Like whenever I get a notification, say 7 p.m., of course I understand people need some help, but if I find it not important, my immediate action is, can we talk about that tomorrow? So that people get into that mindset, especially in the beginning, as new people join the company, sometimes they feel like I really got to talk about this now. And it's important to show them, maybe not now, you can do it tomorrow. It's totally fine. It starts there, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it must be interesting for you guys as the co-founders, and as you have to run the company. So as you say, when you're working with people across different time zones, it's tough for you both to stay off, Slack outside of that normal 9 to 5 for you both. But like, yeah, I mean, one thing I'll add to this is that we have a really good policy at Sketch on how we communicate across Slack and the expectations that we have of each other. So to make it known if something's urgent, to say it's urgent. Otherwise, you're safe to assume that it's not urgent. And that really helps, like, not to feel any kind of pressure when people are sending you messages and all the rest of it, especially if they're doing it in their time zone that's out of your normal working hours. If okay, well, unless they've told me it's urgent, it's not urgent, that helps that disconnect. And I think setting those rules out is really good. Like I know, like I feel like I really benefit from it in the job, and I think that's something that people can apply in their organizations as well.
Yeah, indeed, and just because of the remote space that we have to put everything in the writing, and so any proposal of sorts that you type up, it is very easy then to take those files and say, okay, this is done now. I'll just leave it in. I'll just leave it in the room for tomorrow. People can come back to it whenever they are. You don't need to pull someone in physically. So I think the delays just work well.
Yeah, and if I can develop on that, I think remote in that aspect is very inclusive. It allows you to say you are busy right now. Say I'm designing something, but Peter is having an important conversation in another channel. You can still go on with the conversation. I can still go on with the design, because in a couple of hours, since it's written, since it's in a different channel, I can just go and participate and have my own point of view without the pressure of thinking, I really got to find the time and a way to participate in all the meetings. And I think that's why a lot of people, when they go remote, they say they can be more productive in a way, is that you can prioritize what's important without ignoring everything else. You eventually find time to go there and participate. And that's, for us, that's amazing. That's amazing. It's very relieving to know that I can go later and just be as important to the conversations as anyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, that's a really important point. There's the whole fear of missing out thing. And mostly that's about when your friends are doing something and you're not, but I think it applies to work too. Like if there's a conversation happening that's like at all interesting to you, but you're busy doing something else, or, perhaps it's the end of the working day for you because your time zone, there is that fear of missing out. But because of the way we work and because we are writing stuff down and everything's in Slack, it's like, I know that I can finish my day if there's another conversation happening and go, okay, well, I can just pick that up tomorrow and read back. Yep. So it's really helpful. Next question. How do you conduct meetings remotely and stay on track with so many different time zones? We've sort of touched on that, but we can expand a bit more now.
At Sketchfully, it happens that even though we are remote and we have people from all around the world, we can notice a trend of most people being within 1 to 2, 3 hours time zones wise. So we're lucky when it comes to that. So there's a clear overlap, and we can get a lot of time working together, say from 9 to 5. Other than that, properly setting up specific squads helps a lot by not necessarily forcing you to have a lot of meetings all the time. Yeah. So if you can have a clear group focused on a task, I think the necessity for constant meetings, it's not there. For us, it's not there.
Indeed.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, I think most people that I work with, I can, I have like 3, 4, maybe 5 hours of overlap with them every day, regardless of what time zone they're in, which means that if we want to set up a meeting, it's really easy. But as you say, I know if I want to set up a meeting about a specific thing, because of the way we organize ourselves, I know exactly who to ask to that meeting. Yeah. Like, I'm not trying to pull in everyone or invite everyone. And yeah, as a result, I don't think I do as many meetings, which is good, because that helps you stay more productive, because meetings can be productive, but they're not always the most productive use of time if you've got, you've always got other work to do, right? So yeah,
it's a thing a lot of people, when they join us, they find interesting that they expect to have a lot more meetings being remote than they actually had in an office, and that's scary. But in our case, like I said, if having a written setup, it's not at all. We end up having as little meetings as possible for a long period.
No, indeed. I mean, if you work on a certain feature with 6 to people or something, those people are all in one room, and just during the day there's a natural conversation that happens. People ask questions in your own time, you answer, and in their own time they reply back, and that removes the need for many planned meetings.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, well, next question. What's the most challenging part of running a remote team of over 50 people, and how have you been able to address it? Well, we were 50 people. We've now passed 50 people. We're almost at 100 people. So we've been there and done it. So yeah, what is the most challenging part of that, and how have we addressed it?
I think a challenging part here with the remote team is that you don't see the people every day. And so as the team slowly grows over time, it's very easy to lose track of like how big the team actually is. Like at any point of course, I know at a certain point we were 10 people, we were 20 people, and I know that number, but you don't really know what that number means until you see everybody in the same room. Just after a certain point, you think, oh my God, this entire room, this is 40 people, and I knew we were 40, but you just don't realize how many people that actually is. And so one thing that is related to that is that when the team is really small, let's say maybe less than 10 people, just automatically everybody sort of knows what everybody does, why we're doing things, where we're headed. And as the team grows, there are certain barriers that you cross where that automatic dissemination of information no longer works, where you need where you start needing extra layers, where you need a little bit of extra organization, like formally putting people in squads, formally having like a direct layer of management. You can't be fully flat anymore. And I think as you are remote, it's easy to go past the points where the previous structure no longer works, and you're not as quick to realize that. And so I think that is one of the major risks. And so we've crossed a number of those barriers, and we should have realized that we've crossed those earlier than we did.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. It's like about maintaining that awareness of the size of your team and how that affects how your team works, because it's like you say, it's really easy to not have a sense of scale when everyone's not in the same room. But I remember it really hit me last year when we had a company meetup, which we'll talk about company meetups a bit later. We're in The Hague and we went out for dinner, and we basically took up an entire restaurant. Like it was, and it was like being at a wedding, because there was just loads of tables with everyone on it was from Sketch, and it was. You don't realize that when you're working day to day in Slack, because you might only be chatting with a room with maybe 20 people in as a maximum. Even that feels busy, but when you see everyone in a room, it really hits you. But yeah, I think, like you say, maintaining that awareness of how many people there are and what that actually means in terms of how you work helps you overcome those
Now,
problems.
I mean, 8 years ago, I was working alone behind my Mac in a room in my house, and it is still the case. And it's really those, indeed, it's really easy to miss those changes if you don't see them with your eyes every day.
Yeah, exactly. The next question is, how do you create a policy to allow people to work their own hours if working from 9 to 5 at home doesn't allow people to be their most productive selves? So I think, I guess this is, because we've talked a lot about working 9 to 5, but we don't actually mean working 9 to 5 in all cases, do we?
I mean, I don't think such a policy should exist to begin with. I believe most people end up doing a 9 to 5 schedule, though we make that in many ways optional. Just because you work from home doesn't mean you don't have other responsibilities. We have a lot of parents at Sketch. I would say more than half of the team have kids. In the morning, it's pretty usual for people to drop kids at school, daycare. It's important to allow that flexibility because people will be a lot more productive if you provide that flexibility, be it in the morning, during lunchtime, or even at night. Some people just prefer to start a little later, end up a little bit later, or split their work. They work for 3 blocks during the day span. That's totally fine because, again, we have people in the United States, in South America, in Asia. Eventually, we always have people working with us, so it's totally fine to take a little bit of initiative and schedule things your own way. That's important, in my opinion.
Yeah. Also, in addition to that, we do say to people, hey, we sort of expect these 9 to 5 hours. Also, because if you are in the US, don't feel like you have to get up at 5 in the morning, just so that you have enough hours of overlap with us, work what are sensible hours for you, and we have enough people in enough overlapping time zones that we are sure you can be productive.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I don't know, I don't know about you guys, but for me, I found that the times that I feel the most productive and the times that I work best actually change over time. Sometimes I do a lot better in the evenings. I sit there in the evening and I'm like, I've just cracked this problem that I've had for, going around in my head all day. And so I know that I can work, I can come back on, work a couple of hours to do the thing that I've wanted to do, go to bed feeling great because I've done it, and then be like, well, I don't have to get up early and be here because we're not set to a specific time scale, and it's been, it's good to know that from our perspective, we're not sitting here tracking everyone's hours. No one's clocking in and clocking out, and it's more important that you're doing the right things.
Such a thing, no?
Yeah. Exactly. Which is, if you're coming from a traditional office background, you might be more used to something like that. I know I have been, but yeah, there's no need for it. So it's nice to be able to not do that, and it's just about giving people the freedom.
It empowers people, right, Peter?
Yeah,
trusting them and telling them you are the number one responsible to schedule your work. Most people will think they are not going to work. Trust me. That's not been the case for us ever so far. Most people are very responsible if you provide them the means to take their own schedule into, they program their own schedule their own way. People actually end up doing more work than sometimes we want, right? It goes the other way around. People end up working a little bit more than, in my opinion, what they should. That's also hard to manage.
So you end up saying, hey, what are you still doing here? Rather than hey, you need to work more. It's that doesn't happen. And just from my own experience, many years back, though, I got stuck on a certain programming problem, and then the solution to that is not only just stay on your Mac until after midnight until it's solved. But no, I go downstairs and I play the piano for half an hour, and then I come back with an idea. Often that is much more productive than just sticking to the problem. So if people feel like they have the freedom to do these things, I think it helps everybody.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Next question is, do you have daily or weekly check-ins in place to ask for designers to get feedback, or are they more ad hoc sessions?
Yeah, we do. We split our work in sprints. So we always make sure that within the sprint times, usually 2 weeks, designers have time for design critique, dog fooding. It's definitely part of our process, yes. I should add, design at Sketch, we are a design product. It's not just a designer's effort. Our development team is as enthusiastic about design implementations as our designers. So eventually we have to do this differently. It doesn't always have to be design critique, but mostly product critique. That works really well for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to elaborate a bit on those check-ins, as we've already mentioned, like we work in like small teams that are focused on individual features. Sorry, and they often have a sort of a daily asynchronous stand-up where you say, like, what did you do yesterday? What did you plan? What do you plan to do today? What do you need help with? And that happens very often. It happens asynchronously. Sometimes at the end of a sprint, there is a call just face to face, but that sort of depends on the nature of the squad and the feature that they are working on.
Okay, next question. How do you do collaborative design sessions with other designers? Is it similar to gathering around a physical whiteboard and sketching something out together? What do we do?
It's a lot of talking, a lot of exchanging mockups and sketches, and more in a more asynchronous way than what you would have in front of a whiteboard, which I think helps. I mean, at our meetups, again, we have in-person meetups from time to time, but problems can appear deceptively simple when you're all in the same room and you work on something. So often it has happened that we have agreed on something in a room. We all go back in the evening or during some downtime and think, well, actually, that doesn't work because of X or Y. When a meeting happens like in a more asynchronous matter over text, I find that I spend less time sort of thinking about what the person is saying, how they're saying their facial expressions, sort of thing. I have more time. I'm not sure what it is, but I have more time to focus on the actual thing that they are proposing. And I find that in writing, I have more time to process that and then process my response to that. Whereas if it's in the person, very often I jump to okay, that sounds reasonable. So in fact, I find a synchronous sort of text-based design sessions to often be more productive than the ones in person.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then, final question kind of on the design theme for now. So do you have any tips for running remote design critiques?
It's a bit like I said. It's a team effort at Sketch. For us, it's very important to make sure everyone involved, specifically in the squad, developers, the designers, Q&A, the project managers, that they all discuss, and eventually provide, show the team the product that they are working on, allow some time for dog fooding, allow some time for testing. That is our own way to what people would call a design critique. Like I said, we are product focused mostly, not just design.
Let's have a look what's going on here. Oh, there we go.
Some light.
Oh, sorry. Zoom has a problem with your audio. If you
with mine?
Okay, no, mine.
You are. I can hear you, Pieter.
Me too. I can hear you.
Okay.
You seem to be back. You seem to be okay.
So I was saying that I think it's important to take your time with the design critique. Take your computer, disconnect from Slack, and just really try to think about the problem in a deep way, which I think a remote setup allows. Because you don't have to come up with an immediate opinion about what you think about something.
Yeah, Definitely. I mean, I kind of equate it to. I didn't really introduce what I did at the beginning, but I'm primarily a writer at Sketch, and I think it's the same thing. It's like I design with words, so being able to disconnect and be away from distraction and spend focused time solving whatever problem I'm solving in terms of how I communicate something, that's really handy. And then, as we say, just discussing it with people. None of our work kind of sits alone in isolation, and it's always better for those discussions you have where we figure out problems or spot things that we perhaps weren't thinking about. So yeah, that's, like you say, it's good to go away from Slack or wherever else and focus on something, and then balance it out with these kind of discussions where everyone gets involved. It's not just about one discipline. Sometimes, as you say, we're a product company, so having multiple disciplines working on different things really helps. Okay, the next questions. We've got a few questions on company culture here. And I think we should probably kind of preface these questions by saying that, company culture isn't something you can like set out in a document. You can't say this is our company culture. Company culture kind of evolves through what people do and how people do it. And it comes across over time. It's quite a hard thing to describe as well. I mean, like I'd say we have a fairly strong company culture, but it's sometimes hard to put that into words.
It is.
But let's dive into the questions and we can discuss that a little bit more. So how do you make sure that there's a healthy dose of non-work related communication and that team members can get to know each other personally?
Yeah, so we mentioned the company meetup already. That happens once a year. It used to happen twice a year, but as the company grows, it gets this sort of the logistics of it make it practical, and that really helps for getting to know the person behind the words. But also, I mean, this comes back to what I said for a previous question. Like, try to set the right example, give people the space to do it. We have plenty of off-topic channels where we talk about pizza, food, health, all manner of things. And if you give people that space, then they will share. That just happens. People want to communicate and share, and I do think we have a very rich company culture that I can't really describe, but that I know is there, both in off-work channels and work channels. It just comes through.
Yeah,
last
definitely.
time I checked, we had around 120 Slack channels where more than half of those channels were not work related. People were just discussing hobbies, parenting, food, health, like Pieter said. It's quite interesting because it was never meant to be like that. It's just a consequence of people feeling comfortable to share what they do, what they like. I think that's how you create culture, is freedom and trust.
Exactly. And I think it's nice as well that they're, these are all things that we discuss during, our working day. Like there's no one saying, hey, don't go discuss pizza, during the working day. Like we do that because that's how we bond and get to know each other. And it's how you kind of like find those kind of shared interests with people and everything else. And it's a really nice part of what we do. And, I'm not going to do the analysis of how many Slack channels I'm in and how many of those are non-work related, but there's a fair few there that are non-work related. Right. And it's nice. And I think that you're right. That's how the culture builds. It's not about setting something out, but like it's giving people those spaces to discuss the things outside of work that are non-work related things that they enjoy. And actually, and then when the time comes for our like in-person meetups, when you see people, you can talk about those things too, and you've got somewhere to start. It's not awkward. Like, it's nice. It's a nice thing.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question. Okay. So we've sort of half answered this already, but like, I think it's cool to go into this in a little bit more detail, which is, how do you create a company culture with a remote team? So yeah, as we discussed, we definitely have one. So, how we've gone about that, we've kind of talked about a little bit, but what do you think was kind of most important to that in terms of what we've done?
Like I said, freedom. You don't create culture. If you think you are owning and creating the culture in your company, I don't think you fully realize how people work. I think it's very important to make sure there is freedom, there is trust, there is ownership as well. It's important for people to feel like if they are working on a project, that it means something to them, and that the result is highly reliant on their own commitment. That translates from work to personal relationships within the company. Like I said, freedom is very, very, very important. The meetup is another way we have to make sure that we foster good relationships among everyone. We have people from 22 different nationalities, so it's very interesting to get together and see the general habits. Like breakfast is different for everyone, and that's fine. That's amazing. It's always becomes a topic. We also have those ad hoc meetings where specific teams can get together and, let's say, for a week work next to each other. Remote is great. It's not perfect though. It's important to make sure that whatever you think you're blocked on some feature or some idea, getting together helps, of course. Making sure that it's available. It's how you set up culture. Is give people the freedom to pick their own tools, which in my opinion is also important, right, Peter? We were not big users of Notion 8 months ago, but eventually, Freddie, you start using it to document your own marketing. I think it was you and Patrick, right?
Yeah.
And eventually we're like, this is a very helpful tool that provides us a lot more insight than Slack is doing right now. But you see, it came from the people that work at Sketch, not leadership or anyone else that is responsible for such a thing. I think that shows how flexible it should be and the results we get from it. Yeah,
indeed. Yeah, and that's something that I felt immediately coming into the company. I'm actually a few days off my 1 year Sketch anniversary, there's just a lot of freedom and there's a lot of trust to just do things the way you think should be done. And I think that's as important to culture, and perhaps even more important to the culture of the company than having a channel to discuss Lego. Like it's both of those things are really important, but having that freedom is just, it's great. It's what makes it enjoyable. Off the back of that, it's kind of a good place to move on to the next question, which is how do you keep the team motivated?
Indeed, this comes back to many of the things we've talked about. It's not sure. It's very, very different, specific to remote teams. I mean, I think people are motivated when sort of they care about the work that they do, about the people that they work with, when the things that they have a sense of ownership about the things that they work on, that they feel that they can make an impact with the decisions that they make, the autonomy that you will give them, which is about their time, which we've talked already on, but also just the work directly. I think that's the most important thing. Meaningful projects, then that we give them the trust to sort of act on that and do their best.
Yeah, definitely. It always feels like the work's meaningful, and that's important. Like it doesn't feel like, I think you are just naturally more motivated when you know like kind of the importance of your work, and also that you have autonomy to work on it and take it in a direction that you think makes sense. So that's really good. Okay, final kind of culture question for now. We talked about a few of these things quite a lot, but just as a bit of a summary for people who didn't get it or may have just tuned in, how do you implement team bonding? I feel like we all know each other pretty well, so we must be doing something right.
Yeah, I think the meetup is very important. Just because you're working remote, don't drop face-to-face time at all. Actually, every time there is an opportunity to do it. It's important. The small gatherings. This year, last Christmas, people set up Christmas dinners on every country that we are. That was great. Again, it was a people initiative and couldn't have been better. I totally enjoyed it. We have a big team in Portugal, big team in the Netherlands as well by now, right? UK. Yeah. It's important to make sure we can provide those things. But yeah, get as much face-to-face time as possible. Don't ignore it. It is important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I suppose the good thing is if you're watching this as someone who's coming into remote working from a team that sees each other a lot, and this is the remote working thing is new to you, luckily you're probably halfway there with the team bonding thing. So that's a good thing. Should make your lives a little bit easier while you're getting used to remote working. Okay, we have a question here about research. How does your user research process work with a fully distributed team?
So there's sort of two aspects to it. There's the internal quote unquote research we do. I mean, we have very deep believers in like extensive dog fooding of our own product. I mean, Sketch started because Emmanuel had a problem with the tool that he was using, and I recognized it in people, in designers I had worked with. So we specifically set out to build a tool for ourselves, and that hasn't really changed. I mean, we have a large group of designers in the company, but with Sketch for Teams, we also make tools for the other stakeholders that are involved in the product process. So yeah, we use our own tools. We think that is a very important part of research as such. The other aspect is, of course, talking to your customers outside the company. And just because we're distributed, I don't think it changes it much. Like we have many people living in big hubs where there are companies that we can go visit in the person, and as well, wherever you have an office, there will be customers that want to talk with you, that you want to ask stuff. You can either fly over there or just do a Zoom call. I don't think the remote aspect is that big of a differentiating factor.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Okay, well, we're flying through some questions here, which is great. So we can get onto a few extras, which I didn't know we'd have time for, but I think they're good questions. So first up, how do you structure your onboarding process?
I can talk a little bit about this. So it's important to have the lead of the team people this person is joining, overlooking all the process. But most importantly, setting a buddy, someone that has been working on that team for a while. I think that is very helpful. Documentation is super important, but nothing best having a buddy, someone who can walk the job with you for 2 to 3 months and provide you insight into everything. Again, this also helps culture because you can get a lot of personal time with someone, relate to it, someone you feel you have a backup on whenever a problem arises. I think that is mostly our onboarding process, of course, other than all the documentation and all that, the usual stuff. Indeed.
I think the documentation is very important. Our first few onboardings were messy because we didn't have things set up, but as you do it more, you start to develop a good process, a good set of documentation where you can tell people, hey, this is, read here, this is how we work, this is the stuff you need, here are the tools, and all of that is standardized. It eases it. But there's just no getting around the fact that the first week is intense. But I've heard from many people that in their first week, they are just amazed by how we can be active in so many different conversations, how we can keep track of so many different Slack channels. But then 2 or 3 weeks in, it's just like, yeah, it's fine. I mean, it took some getting used to, but just because it's new. But if you get help with your onboarding, and just it works.
It's funny because it was something that was going through my mind when I remember back before I started, and I thought, well, how is this going to work? Because every company I've worked in, I've been in a physical office and I've sat down at a desk and someone sat down with me, and it's effectively the same thing with a buddy, right? You have someone who effectively is next to you all day, just in a Slack DM, and they're there to answer those kind of questions that you might feel a bit stupid asking, like you might feel silly asking a question, but like, that's what they're there for. So that was really good. And like you say, the documentation side of it really helps as well, because it's always there to refer to. You don't have to, no one's saying it all to you and you're just having to remember it. It's there and it's always there. So if you forget something a week in or 2 weeks in or a month in, it's fine. It's just written down somewhere. You can go back to it. So making sure that you have something to fall back to and read is helpful. And it's funny you say about the being able to kind of keep up with different Slack channels and everything else, Peter, because I always kind of feel like it's the bit in Batman where he's got like all the screens with everything that's going on all around the world. That's what it feels like sometimes when you first like start and you're like, how does everyone keep up with this? But actually, after a few weeks, you become like a Slack pro and it's fine. And it isn't as overwhelming as that might sound. Like, I think that when we say it like that, it sounds overwhelming. It's not overwhelming. And like we say, we keep squads small. So like, you don't have to be involved in every conversation. We're very good at knowing when to communicate stuff with the rest of the company. And, that's what, weekly stand-ups. So in the marketing team, we have a weekly stand-up, but we also do daily status updates and stuff like that. So, it's quite easy to keep up with what's going on and what's happening and what's important. And I think that really helps, especially in those first few weeks.
Indeed, the fact that we work in smaller teams, so there is a very clear focus of what you're supposed to work on. I think that helps a lot. Yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, next question. What is stopping more companies from adopting a remote work model? I mean, obviously right now, nothing's stopping them because most of them are having to do remote work. But in general, why are more people not doing this as their kind of normal day-to-day?
We never really said this. We never really started out with Sketch with the idea like, hey, we're going to do a remote company. The beginning, it was just supposed to be us two, and then you think of, two people is not really like, you do call that remote. So it just sort of happened over time as an accident, as we found that Sketch couldn't just be us two, so we needed people. I was in Amsterdam, Emanuel was in Portugal, so by definition we were remote, and we just started hiring people in various places. And it wouldn't have been something that we would have started with. We would probably have said, okay, we're going to build this company, let's open and let's move to one central location, whether it be London or Amsterdam or I don't know. So it happens as an accident. So for us, it's good. What's stopping more companies is maybe just, it's hard to have this mixed model we already talked about. Like, we're lucky that we started this way. Now many companies are forced to work this way. So maybe it's fine. Maybe it's a combination of sort of fear and tradition. Like, we've never had to do it this way. So maybe people not being forced to do it actually will show companies, hey, this can actually work. And in a way, if you have a big company and you already have multiple offices spread around multiple times on multiple cities, even, you already have to work in a sort of a remote way, because you have to document things so that people in other offices can work along. So I don't think it's as big a step as people think it is. I think it's just fear and tradition holding it back.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of related to that then, what do you think needs to change in general in terms of like a societal perception, like a perception society on remote work? What needs to change there?
Good question. I think many companies are stuck on non-remote setting out of fear, out of being the traditional way of working. Like, if you don't work in an office, you're not doing good work, or your work is not as meaningful enough. In the beginning, of course, when I start working like this, I started as a freelancer. I think a lot of designers and developers relate to that, is you always feel like it's an act, like you must do it that way because you need to find a job. You cannot find a job locally. But that is the thing. If people expand their horizons, eventually they will understand, if you go remote, you can actually hire the best talent for your team. You're not limited to the resources available in your city. Not every city is San Francisco, London, or Berlin, okay? And companies don't always have to be created in those polos. It's important to understand. You can create a company exactly where you are, and it's totally fine to seek talent all around the world. I think that is a mindset that needs to change. And it's really about having people. I think a lot of previously, by tradition, people want to have a company, whereas at Sketch, we wanted to have a product. The company is the result of it. It was important for Sketch to make specific hires in the beginning, and those specific hires were available far from us. And we stick to that, and it's been amazing for us. So I definitely encourage other companies to try something similar, especially if they are starting just now.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, isn't it? Because I think people, it's kind of forced their hand in terms of trying remote working as a company. And maybe people turn around as a result of this and say, hey, well, it's worked well for the last, however many weeks we've had to do it. And so maybe that's something we consider going forward. Maybe we don't need that office we've been paying for. And like you say, it opens up the options in terms of hiring. You're not having to pay to relocate people who have got families and their lives built in different places. They don't have to worry about that either. So yeah, I think it's good.
You actually touch a very interesting topic. When I was a freelancer, I got a lot of work offers to move somewhere, the United States, London. And for me, it was always about, I don't want to do that because I think my job can be done here. I can preserve my family relationships, my friendship, the place I actually love to live here, and still be good at my job. It's very important to, nowadays it's very complicated to convince someone, like, you have to move here if you want to be promoted, if you want a better job and all that. The world doesn't work like that nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we've got 2 more questions and then I think we'll wrap up. What is your general daily workflow working with remote team members, and what tools do you use? So yeah, it's a tools questions, first one we've had. So yeah, what tools do we use?
Tools, we mentioned Slack a couple of times. We mentioned Notion for sort of more long-lived documentation. We use GitHub for issue tracking and everything related to code. I think those are the most important sort of 3 tools that we use. Like now we're using Zoom for video conferencing, which we use from time to time, but many of our meetings are just text-based.
Indeed.
And for the, I think, tools-wise, and of course Sketch. I mean, come on.
Sketch cloud now.
Yep.
Tools-wise, I think that's the most important. That's the most important thing, sort of workflow-wise. Well, I try to stick to a general 9 to 5 as much as I can, just to give the right example. And it's just, I don't know. I started the day, check my notifications, check my to-do list, look at designs that people have posted, and from there on, the day just spirals out of control until it's 5, and I stop.
Yeah. I imagine that I have a slightly less chaotic day than you, perhaps, just because I'm not as in demand for opinions and decisions as you guys are. But yeah, it's similar. Like I start the day at 9, or thereabouts, and I usually have a to-do list that's usually made the night before, because there's always stuff from the day before I haven't done, or I know that something's going to be done the next day, and then it's just getting on with it. Like I don't think there's any weird things we do as a remote company or as remote workers there's any different to what you might do in the office, except that I think, as we said at the very top of this, like no one comes along and disturbs you halfway through your day, at least not as much. So that's handy. Okay, final question for now, I think, is how do you effectively track working hours and or work of your employees? I mean, we've already said we don't really track working hours per se. So, but we do track work in a kind of, not specifically, but like, we have goals, right?
People are working on squad. They have to commit to ship that product or that feature within the time span that has been defined. That's all we ask. We don't track hours at all. Never did. I don't think it helps. Not today. No.
Yeah, exactly. And there's something quite nice about that. Like I said earlier, like what I said, like, sometimes the morning is not a productive time for me. So I'm not sat here thinking, if something's not coming to me and I'm not having a good productive morning, which happens from time to time, I'm not worried about it because no one's checking my hours. No one's going, hey, why aren't you working right now? Or hey, why aren't you doing this right now? Like, but then later in the evening, if I have a great idea and I can come back to it and work on it, and it's good. And it's nice to be in a position where all that really matters is, we've got these goals that we need to achieve in this period of time. Like, let's just get them done. Doesn't matter exactly when you work, just, as long as they get done.
Indeed. And just because you can't walk past someone's desk and check that that they're behind their desk and they're not on Facebook or something, doesn't mean that they're actively being productive. I mean, being productive is the thing that you should care about, not whether they are occupying their spot behind their computer. A few weeks ago, I was on a Q&A in Amsterdam about remote work, and someone mentioned the example that in their company, management had installed a tool that took screenshots of their Mac at random intervals throughout the day, just to make sure. And that is just horrible. And we would never do something like that. You never want to track whether your employees are being useful that way. You should check the outcome of the work.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think we're pretty much done with questions. Just checking to see if we got any more. I think we're pretty much there. So this is probably a good time to wrap up. We're actually 4 minutes before the end of the hour, so this is good. We've done well on timing. So if you're still watching, which many of you are, thank you very much for sticking around and watching this whole thing. We hope it was really useful for you. We hope that if you're new to remote working, that this session gave you some advice and some ideas that maybe you hadn't thought about, or it maybe provided you some reassurances. And thanks again for tuning in and watching. Thanks to Pieter and Emanuel for taking some time to answer all these questions. And yeah, if you are new to Sketch, if you don't know us, then you can go to sketch.com and find out what we're all about. You can start a 30-day free trial of Sketch from sketch.com as well. So if you've got lots of time at the moment while you're isolating at home, now's a good time to pick up Sketch and find out what it's all about. And yeah, if you're working in a team as well, we have team subscriptions and that enable you to work together on stuff as well. So that is the kind of plug bit at the end. And I think that's pretty much us done. So thanks again for tuning in and watching. And please let us know if you enjoyed it. We'd love to know what you thought of this, and maybe we'll see you again soon. Okay, thanks very much.
If you have more questions, you can ask us on Twitter.
Yes.
Just let us know if there's something we discussed here or some of a question you thought was not properly addressed. Just let us know on Twitter. We're happy to keep the conversation going.
Indeed, we're active there. So indeed, ask questions there, and if not, thanks for watching.
Okay. Thanks very much, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.
Take care.